Welcome to No Room for Phonies.
Episode 108.
And this book is by she's actually a very prolific writer. Her name is Harriet Lerner. She has a PhD. She's a psychologist, a counselor, whatever. And she's written a lot of books. The Dance of Fear, The Dance of Anger.
Oh,
she's written The Dance of Motherhood.
Did you read the anger and the fear one?
I read the fear one.
Is that about like anxiety and how to live through, how to cope? And okay.
But this one is called Why Won't You Apologize? Healing Big Betrayals and Everyday Hurts. And I would say that it is the most comprehensive book I have ever read on forgiveness and
apologizing. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're just going to give a kind of like sort of simplified, overview of the chapters, because again, like the other book I was talking about, she gives like tons and tons and tons of examples, stories of people who are apologizing and how things go, good and bad and ugly. She does give, right?
Yeah,
like
lots of examples. And I also like how she talks about her and her husband a lot.
She does, yeah.
It's very good.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in there too. So there's many faces of I'm sorry. That's her kind of her first chapter. Like there's when you say I'm sorry when nothing is really anybody's fault. Like I'm sorry that happened. It's just that matter of communicating you care.
It's kind of a conversational filler just to show some level of empathy, or it's also the Canadian I'm sorry.
Right. Yes. Well, and sometimes the failure of the other person to apologize when they should hits us harder than the deed they should apologize. And she gives the example of when, you have a long wait in a
between the offense and the apology?
No, when you have a long wait in an exam room or for a doctor.
Oh, yeah.
And, you start getting very uptight, but really no one's going to apologize for that.
No.
So, and then apologies are more difficult to offer when we do have something to apologize for and we regret our behavior. So, email is not a good choice, and it's really about restoring.
You mean to send apologies by email?
Yeah, that's
no,
bad
not
choice.
so good.
It's about restoring some
or
bit
texting.
of trust or closeness. And you sometimes don't even realize, kind of that it's missing. But apologies really do have to be face to face.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I know it's not her work, but Gary Chapman wrote about the 5 ways to apologize.
Yes, she refers to that, actually.
Okay. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of that in the face-to-face conversation. That's so important.
And I mean, she recognizes that it takes a lot of courage to open up a conversation, apologize for something that we wish we had handled differently in the past, because we're being vulnerable and because you're really taking a leap into the unknown. You don't know
you don't know how it's going to end,
and you don't know how that person is going to react.
No, and sometimes we want to preserve the relationship more than we want to deal with the matter at hand.
Yes. And I mean, both personal integrity and success in relationships depends on our ability to take responsibility for our part. And she emphasizes only our part when the other person, even when the other person is really being a jerk about everything.
And I think that only our part is very important because of how quickly a downtrodden person that apologizes for everything that they did that aren't responsible for.
And she really does get into all that. All those aspects of everything when you just say
the unhealthy apology. Yeah.
And the most difficult part is actually coming to terms with the unrepentant wrongdoer. And she gets into that a lot. Mm-hmm. So then her next chapter is ways to ruin an apology. And
so sometimes it's the word that is tagged on at the end.
But
I'm sorry, but
I'm really sorry I did that, but...
There were some other ones that wasn't just the word but. It was,
oh, no, she goes on, I'm sorry you feel that way. Keep your focus on your actions and not the other person's. Like the response, I'm sorry that you overreacted to my perfectly reasonable comments. Like if you don't feel you have a need to apologize, then don't.
Right.
Don't say but. Just don't apologize and explain why you don't.
And don't apologize for them feeling that way.
Yeah. That's their own choice. How you feel is your choice, right?
Yeah.
And then it says, watch out for if, inviting the other person to question their own reactions. Like, I'm sorry if I wasn't sensitive, or I'm sorry you were offended by what I said, because it comes across as condescending.
And therefore it's no longer an apology.
It's not an apology, yeah. And then the mystifying apology. I am sorry that what I said made you so upset. The apology makes you feel uncomfortable and off balance because it's not specific
enough, yeah.
Like, if it happens over and over again and the behavior doesn't change or look what, like, it's kind of like, look what you are making me do.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
right.
It's doesn't have meaning. Forgive me already and do it now. You cannot view an apology as an automatic ticket to redemption and forgiveness.
Right. And
she really talks about that a lot. That's probably one of the most freeing parts of her book, is the idea that forgiveness isn't the only thing that brings healing.
Right. But it's very interesting because in some families of origin, that need to forgive is put, like, children are taught, well, now you have to forgive your sibling because they said they're sorry. And even though it wasn't a sincere sorry.
Yeah. Or they keep doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So they don't really, right?
No, but then, the pressure, there's some families where there's always a pressure to apologize, and then other families where there's always the pressure to forgive.
Right. And then the last one is called the intrusive apology. You can't apologize to someone who doesn't want to hear from you. Like in the case of an affair, the victim may feel re-traumatized. You can make amends only when doing so will not injure the hurt party or other people. So sometimes you just have to realize that it is not, it's just not
at
the time.
This goes way back to a long time ago, a podcast, White Fragility.
Right.
So when white people apologize for racism,
right, yes,
and they bring things up, and that's re-traumatizing.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely. But they're just trying to feel better about what they did or about
it's all about
their people.
Because if I say I'm sorry, then I can just move on. I don't have to feel bad anymore.
Yeah,
right. And then the next chapter is called More Wimpy, Overblown, and Downright Relationship Busting Sorries.
Good titles.
And so she talks about over apologizing, and she has a line called "Don't cry someone else's tears." So, and then a good apology is not about you. Part of a true apology is staying deeply curious about the hurt person's experience rather than hijacking it with your own emotionality. You can't act like you feel sorry for yourself.
Right.
Like, where you're, I'm so sorry. When meanwhile, like, you're the one who
the perpetrator.
And then not to underdo it either. I'm sorry may also feel empty and half-hearted if there's no attempt to make some restitution.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, one of her big points is that the apology is just the beginning of fixing
the situation,
whatever has happened. Yeah. And then there's what she calls the good enough apology. Apologies about apologies in the public and political sphere as well, where remorse is fake and accountability is absent and blame is shifted from the wrongdoer.
Yeah.
Like what we see all the time.
In politics, yep.
In a good enough apology includes the words, I'm sorry, without ifs, buts, or any manner of undoings, obfuscations, and the like. So that is really what they're saying. Refer to the book, The 5 Languages of Apology. Right. So the magic words are, I was wrong. I promise to do my best to ensure it won't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the good enough apology, not the one, where there's no accountability
for anything.
So, and then there's the apology. She has a chapter called Apologizing Under Fire, How to Handle Big Time Criticism.
So one thing I did like about the book, it addresses both the receiver of the apology and the person owing the apology.
It's the whole big thing. And I mean, apologizing is difficult when we see the need for it and believe it's the right thing to do. It is far more difficult still when we are confronted with criticism we don't see coming and that we don't believe is fair. So she talks a lot about some criticism we receive will undoubtedly come from the other person's reactivity rather than our bad behavior.
Right.
So there are times when you're criticized.
Yeah, because the other person
Like-
is in the height of anger or
Yeah.
pain or, or defensiveness. Yeah.
Some criticism we receive will undoubtedly, from there. Yeah. So then she has this whole bit about how to decode a faux apology.
That's a phony one.
Yeah. So, and she always talks about reacting to the situation, not the person. I never meant to hurt you. I'm a good person and I didn't do anything wrong. I did the best I could, and what more can you say to that? So whatever I did wrong, I'm sorry. If I did something wrong, I'm clueless about what it is, but I'm sorry, so let's move on.
Those are all fake apologies.
Yes. Who is going to apologize first? How do you break a multi-generational pattern, which is what you're
Yeah. So
talking about?
Yeah, but there's the families of origin where you learn how not to apologize, or you learn bad apologizing or fake ones, or
Well, and she says to write a letter if you have like an intergenerational issue. She says to write it in a letter, but she gives like a very clear outline of what the letter should look like.
Interesting.
Focus on only on yourself. No implied criticism or blame. Don't request or demand a particular
response.
Like broaden the whole frame of the issue. Stand for connection without getting preachy. Don't overload the circuits by going on too long. Don't push contact before the other person is ready. And there's an example in the book of a letter.
Yes.
That is written between
a mother and daughter.
Mother and daughter. Yeah. So her one thing is to listen with an open heart and ask questions to help us better understand the other person, and is a spiritual exercise in the truest sense of the word. And when I'm talking about
Sorry, what is a spiritual exercise?
to listen with an open heart and ask questions, like to to try to understand somebody else and not just get wrapped up in what you're thinking.
Right.
Is actually a spiritual exercise. And when you offer a genuine apology, she says that you always tell the person that you're going to keep thinking about what they've told you. So that it's not just, okay, I'm sorry I did that, I'm moving on. No, I will think about this. And you can talk about how you now see things differently.
Right.
Like, we don't have to passively accept criticism that we believe are wrong, unjust, and totally off the mark. Like, we can say, well, I don't feel I need to apologize.
Or you can apologize, and if somebody unleashes a whole attack on you, you can say, well, I will continue to think about that.
And then you go back for more conversation.
Yeah.
Because if the apology is sincere, then we are fully accountable for the part that we're responsible for in the issue.
And we're not responsible for their reaction.
And she talks about, what if you are blasted? We don't have to stay mute while another person is rude and out of bounds.
Right.
You don't have to stay mute. That's not healthy, actually, to do that.
It's tricky though, because if you don't stay mute when somebody's attacking you, who you've just apologized to, and you've opened up the wound and whatever, you could be accused of gaslighting them the moment that you say that you're being a little too rude with me now.
But the other thing, she actually talks about that, though. You can tell the other person when you can't listen anymore.
Right.
You can just say, okay, I understand that you're still upset, but right now I need to respect myself enough to know that when the conversation is at your expense and you just can't listen anymore.
Right.
And you can just say, right now, I need a break.
I will continue to think about this. Yeah.
Because you have to always be dialing down your own defensiveness. Listening is an active process, and it's a far less natural one than talking.
Right.
We know, right?
And it's our instinct to fight.
And especially for when some people get under pressure, right? Then they
either shut down or they fight.
Like when I've had to have, really serious conversations, say with a staff member that has done something.
Yeah.
And they just start and you're just like, okay,
Listen.
you just have to listen, and then go away, think about what I've said, think about what I've said the next steps are. And then when you're calmer and feel more in control, you can come back and talk about it again and what you want to do. But you have to recognize your own defensiveness and take some distance from it. And don't focus on little distortions and inaccuracies. And she gives you a whole thing. Breathe. Do what you can to calm yourself. Listen only to understand. Just listen to discover what you can agree with without arguing
Or interrupting.
or refuting everything, and ask questions when you don't understand something. And the other thing is to ask for concrete examples, right? And find something that you can agree with, like a point of commonality, and apologize for your part. And then let the offended party know that he or she has been heard, and you're going to go away and think about it and thank the person for sharing their feelings.
Right.
Because that's commitment. And I think this is particularly important when you're like a boss or you have some authority.
Yeah, because
over a person.
you want the relationship to continue, a healthy work relationship.
Because then you have to take the initiative to bring the conversation up again.
Right.
Right, as the person. And
Who, as the offended person, or as the
as
the person
like,
who's
who
apologizing?
was being told that they had done something that
Right.
you have to bring that you have to go back to the conversation and draw the line at insults. Insist on respect, and don't listen when you can't listen well. And you can say, I'm going to think about this for a couple of days, and then I'll be back on Friday and we can talk about it again. Define your differences. You need to tell the other person how you see things differently.
Yeah,
So
it's interesting.
That's hard to do, because words of apology, no matter how sincere, will not heal a broken connection if we haven't listened well to the hurt party's anger or pain. We have to quiet our mind and open our heart. If only our passion to understand the other person were as great as our passion to be understood. If this were so, all of our apologies would be truly meaningful and healing.
Yeah.
So, you have to step away from feeling, hey, this is wrong, this person's going after me, to actually seeking to,
Understand them.
understand. Sorry, I just need a little sip. And then this is about non-apologizers. She has a whole chapter on the secret life of the non-apologizer.
I like her chapter titles.
Yeah. Some cultural groups place a high premium on apologizing. Some do not, which I'm sure you know.
Yeah,
from your
well, with the different
experience with
students that we have. Yep.
And families have their own traditions about giving and receiving apologies. And people hold strikingly different views about how, when, and if to offer and accept apologies. And our beliefs about apologies are rooted in family and culture and maybe generations in the making.
Right. Well, just think of the stiff upper lip and the be calm and carry on.
Well, and the whole thing about religious,
Yes.
and she gets into that later. Being male makes you less likely to apologize.
I'm sorry, that's not true.
Being female makes you more likely to apologize.
Over apologize.
Yes.
Yes.
No one is immune to becoming defensive and shutting down when our favored image of self is challenged. And perfectionism can be offered as an excuse for defensiveness. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
To offer a serious apology, you need the inner strength to allow yourself to be vulnerable. And then she talks in length about the role that guilt and shame play, and the difference between the guilt is when you feel bad when you've actually done something, and shame is when you're shamed.
When you're shamed.
Yeah.
And that's where the over apologizing
Yes.
comes in often.
The worse the offense and the greater the shame, the more difficult it is for the wrongdoer to empathize with the harmed party and feel remorse.
Wow.
So
So
you
the
can
bigger,
see.
yeah.
Self-protective explanations often shift the blame into the harmed party as ever deeper levels of self-deception come into play. When we have lost sight of our value and worth, defensiveness is where we live.
And that's where gaslighting
Yeah.
begins. Yeah.
And I mean, she's talking about accept no excuses, but don't blame the blamer or shame the shamer. Don't label people. You can't blame your childhood or rely on other excuses or physiological rationalizations.
So that's very interesting. You can't say, oh, I was tired, or oh, I had a headache, or oh, I was.
And we do this with, we tried very hard not to do that with our kids.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he's hungry, so that's why he's behaving. No, you're hungry right now. So
you need to regulate.
We're ready to, we're going to eat in 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So you need to find something to do to regulate yourself while you're waiting for us to finish making dinner. That isn't mean.
And that isn't drinking a whole glass of milk so that you don't eat supper.
Yes, exactly. So the capacity to take responsibility, feel empathy and remorse, and offer a meaningful apology rests on how much self-love and self-respect that person has available.
Yeah.
So that, to me, is very interesting.
Okay, so then she talks about a situation where the person's defensive. So he's so defensive. What do you have to do with it? And some people are entrenched non-apologizers.
So,
and how do you manage those type of people?
Yeah. And she says, stick to the facts. Criticize the behavior, not the person. Don't make the other person into a victim by overdoing the criticism.
Say it shorter and be brief. Know what your goal is and embrace brevity.
Yeah. Less is more. That's a big thing for her. Use timing and tact as much as you can. Kindness, but sometimes you just have to express your raw feelings. You do have to. And shaming never helps. It just makes people want to escape instead of facing the problem.
Yeah, so shaming a non-apologizer is not going to get anything done.
Always identify who is responsible for what, and remember the other person does not cause your feelings or behavior. And never, ever, ever demand an apology. I love this one. How and whether to accept the olive branch.
So this is being the offended person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes courage to say, thank you for your apology. I appreciate it. Don't dismiss the apology that someone has courageously offered.
In fact, one of her examples was actually accepting the apology, even though it was badly done.
Yes.
Just to keep, so therefore you would be able to continue the conversation another
if you
time.
Don't accept the apology, it's done.
Yeah.
Don't dissect the other person's apology. Give the other person the benefit of the doubt. The only test of an apology is if you do better the next time. Words are not the only way to say you are sorry. You can act out your apology. You can make up for your past mistakes with actions, and language matters. Without the actual words, it can feel like something is missing.
And the other thing is, though, when it comes to language, you do have to think about people who speak love languages where it's not words. So sometimes it'll be touch and a run over and hug you.
Yes, absolutely.
Like if it's a child, I'm thinking, right?
Yeah.
Or there'll be like all of a sudden there'll be all these acts of service, like I'm doing this for you, I'm doing this for you.
Yes.
And I know that always bugs you when people don't use the words to apologize. You need to hear the words.
Yeah.
And for you, if people are doing the other workarounds, it's that they're sweeping it under the carpet and they're never going to apologize.
She says language does matter.
It does matter.
Yes.
But
some people, but I think what I'm realizing, like from reading this book, is like some people just aren't capable of it. So I can't stop myself from moving forward,
waiting for them to
that
apologize.
to happen.
Yeah.
And like she says, not everything is forgivable. Accepting an apology doesn't mean reconciliation. You can just say thank you for the apology and move on.
Yeah, I liked that example too,
Right?
that she gave. Like somebody apologized and she said thank you, but there wasn't a rebuilding of a relationship. It was like, okay,
That's fine.
that's fine, thank you.
Sometimes you don't accept an apology for a good reason. Sometimes we don't want to hear repeated apologies from, people.
Yep.
And but always she says, lean into generosity, accept the olive branch, even when you are unhappy with aspects of the apology. Erring on the side of acceptance will create more possibilities for the future of the relationship.
Accepting the olive branch simply means that you agree to end a fight, to lower the intensity, and to open a space for moving forward with goodwill.
Like it just doesn't mean that you trust the person completely.
Yeah, and everything's back to how it was. And,
that's not, especially something that was extremely hurtful.
Yeah.
Who is at fault when reconciliation grinds to a halt? So it is in our most enduring and significant relationships that people become too mad to apologize, which
Yep.
is very
Spouses,
interesting. Yep.
parent, children, siblings.
One or both parties may be convinced that the relationship can't move forward if the other doesn't consider his or her behavior and apologize for it. Yet may be little agreement on who started it, what the offense is, what's required to mend it, and who needs to apologize first. So, you're at a grinding standstill, right?
Yep.
So it's like the he says, she says, and she has this thing where, you can't just keep saying, oh, I'm having a bad day.
No.
Where, it becomes more than
Mm-hmm.
just a bad day. And this circular dance of pursuing and distancing both parties locked into these extreme positions, right? And who's to blame? Relationships don't work. Relationships operate in a circular, not a linear fashion. The behavior of each person provokes and reinforces the behavior of the other. The real question is not who started or who is to blame, but rather what each person can do to change his or her steps in the dance.
I love the analogy of the dance.
Yeah.
Because it's like if somebody misleads at the wrong time or takes the wrong step. Yeah.
I'm sorry for my part is a good first step. And then you move toward connection and do the little things that make the other person feel loved. So have the courage and clarity to define a bottom line which includes our needs and the limits of our tolerance. I like that too. This is the heart of both relationships and a self. It is ultimately an act of kindness and respect, i.e., I'm always here to talk to you about anything that matters, but you need to help me out here, and here's how you can do it.
Right.
So,
yeah. So you need to dial down the criticism and make sure that positive comments exceed negative ones and get out of pursuit mode. Don't take someone's need for space personally.
yeah.
So, you're chasing after, oh, I'm sorry. And then they put the hand up and walk away and you chase them. Oh, I'm sorry. And it's like, no, you have to give them the space to walk away.
Yeah. I think that's a really important thing to teach kids that, you have really misbehaved right now. And I am like,
yeah.
So you need that. The timeout is
perfect for that.
You, but it's also for me.
Well, I remember sometimes we would say to the kids, okay, I'm very upset with you for what you've done. I'm taking a timeout.
Yeah. Because,
just to create some space.
And understand that everybody does need space.
Yeah.
Accepting differences is one of the greatest of all human challenges. Focus on yourself first and your footing will be firmer no matter how the person responds. So this is how I'm going to be in this situation. Whatever that other person does is not going to change that.
And change is a long-term project. Make your goals explicit. So to offer an apology when an apology is due, and then make the other person feel special, valued, and chosen. To respect differences, including different ways of responding to stress, and to focus on changing your own steps in the dance rather than waiting for the other to change first.
To stop negative comments that erode the foundation of a marriage or a friendship and replace them with positive ones. And we shouldn't fake it. It is disrespectful to everyone. Offer an apology, even when we think the disagreement is mostly not our fault, with courageous intention. Don't settle for superficial and premature peace. Changing an entrenched pattern requires patience. It's the direction, not the speed that matters. So she's really talking a lot to married couples.
I think so.
Chapter.
Yeah.
I felt, or people in a relationship.
In a relationship that both parties want to keep going.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be like something, let's say, in a customer service situation where the business, you can walk away from the business.
Yes, which we have many times. Have you ever witnessed an unforgettable or stunning apology? I'm sorry is the first step. You need to continue the conversations. We almost always leave it up to the hurt party to reopen the conversation about painful or traumatic past events, but it really is not their job. You need to be there as the party who caused the hurt and let one thing lead to another. No pressure, just acceptance, patience, and space.
And as a therapist, she has helped relationships between parents and children, and she safely, obviously, appropriately, anonymously gives examples that are real life.
Yes.
And I think that is very helpful because some of them are like kind of unimaginable, and yet there is some kind of restoration.
Yes. Yeah. And then the next chapter is you need to forgive and other lives that hurt you. Forgiveness is not a cheap gift. Rushing to premature and superficial peace can have its own costs. There are many paths to healing that do not require forgiveness. And that is a huge, that's huge.
That's a huge shift culturally, spiritually, socially for a lot of people.
What does
considering
it mean?
our upbringing in the church where we were taught but that
Jesus forgives, so you forgive. Like that's how
and
it
if you
is.
don't forgive, you'll always have sin in your heart.
And I mean, I remember being told as a kid that if I didn't forgive, like I'm going to get sick or like, I mean,
like
that it's going to be like
a curse on you.
Yeah, exactly. And what does it mean to forgive? Most people want to rid themselves of anger, bitterness, or pain. Getting past something and finding some peace of mind. It might not be forgiveness, just because that might be a central part of your religious beliefs or your worldview, but rather resolution, detachment, moving on, letting go.
And detachment is safe and healthy boundaries.
Yeah. And letting go doesn't mean forgiving, forgetting, or whitewashing the other person's bad behavior. The essence of forgiveness is letting go, but it by no means follows that you need to forgive a particular action in order to let go. It is more about not taking the behavior toward you personally. Don't get hooked or ruminate about it, and don't wish the other person ill or need them to be different. Letting go means protecting ourselves from the corrosive effects of staying stuck, which is chronic
anger and bitterness. Yeah.
And it's not about forgiving the actions of the unapologetic offender in order to find peace of mind.
We just need to, over time, dissipate its emotional charge. Sometimes the wrongdoer is unreachable or unrepentant, and we have to decide not to carry the wrongdoing on our shoulders. There is not one path to healing.
And when she says, she talks about, it says it later, recalling a behavior or incident without emotional charge means that you have moved on it, right? And sometimes that takes a really long time, and you never totally lose that little bit of emotional charge depending on how terrible it was. And you have to decide for yourself. No one definition of forgiveness fits all. Empathy isn't forgiveness and doesn't require forgiveness. You can still empathize with someone. When it comes to forgiveness, we all use language differently while assuming we are talking about the same thing. There is nothing lesser or closed-hearted about the person who seeks alternative strategies to releasing themselves from life-draining anger, bitterness, or pain. So it doesn't have to be...
You're not less of a good Christian.
Yes, yeah. Her definition is forgiveness is earned through a process of open-hearted listening and self-examination. Sincere apology or showing the person that you are truly sorry and will not repeat the injury, although you can still love that person without this and wish them well. Forgive, you don't just go, say, I forgive you if the other person isn't part of the equation.
No.
Forgiveness is earned. So I really like that idea. Forgiveness is like the word respect. It can't be commanded or demanded or forced or gifted for no reason at all. I just think it's
very freeing.
And you don't restore your humanity when you forgive an unapologetic offender. He restores his humanity when he works to earn your forgiveness.
And in some cases the person is dead and there's no way.
Yeah.
So you do have to find a way to
but you can come to a
peace.
place of empathy and understanding for the person who injures you and never apologize. And then, she instructs you to kind of look at issues through the widest possible lens. When forgiveness experts talk in binary language, you either forgive or you are a prisoner of your anger and hate. They are collapsing the messy complexity of human emotions into a simple dichotomous equation.
Yeah.
Forgiveness equals peace, and that's not
No.
true. To heal, the hurt party needs to hear an unequivocal validation of the awfulness of the experience and an affirmation that his or her feelings and perception make sense. Can't you forgive him are the last words a hurt or victimized person needs to hear.
No.
Like, can't you
Exactly.
just forgive them and move on?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't have to offer complete forgiveness. It is not all or nothing. There is sometimes a long, bumpy road to restoring trust. Like she gives an example of a marital affair.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks practice radical non-forgiveness and they hold grudges. You do not need to forgive a person who has hurt you in order to free yourself from the pain of negative emotions. You can even reach a place of love and compassion for the wrongdoer without forgiving a particular action or inaction. Which is, when she talks about that, it's all then about not it being about the person, but about what they did.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But it's also that responsibility for your own reactions and your choices
Yes.
about it.
you are not a less loving person if there are certain things you do not forgive or certain people you choose not to see.
No.
So I just thought that was so, and there's so much more to that chapter. Like you really do need to read it. And then she talks about how to find peace. When you see the wrongdoer seemingly untouched, it is sometimes hard not to cling to anger, bitterness, and pain. And then she talks about her mother's advice. The person must be very unhappy to behave that way. Don't take things quite so personally. Unhappiness or insecurity can make people say stupid things. When other people act badly, it has to do with them, not you.
I like
that
your
was
mother.
her mother.
Good advice. We misread people's motives all the time. So in the absence of facts, we are left with our own fantasies. And we do imagine whole conversations and whole scenarios
Yes.
in our heads,
Yeah.
which aren't even
We
real.
tell our kids that sometimes when they have an important meeting or something. Okay,
Yeah.
don't imagine the whole conversation. Just go have it.
Yeah,
Or rehearse it.
they
or
rehearse it.
whatever.
Because we tend to rehearse the negative that isn't even ever going to happen.
And how do we explain the inexplicable? Not simply the rudeness of strangers, but the hurtful actions of the very people who were supposed to nurture and protect us. A far greater value than diagnosing and labeling people is knowing their history and their stories and having a solid theory about how anxiety and shame can drive good people to do bad things.
Wow, that's powerful.
So knowing the facts of family history over generations, achieving a wider historical perspective, and understanding the patterns and triangles in which we all participate can change the meaning of a family member's behavior.
Yeah. Well, like we have mentioned,
Like there's a
Little-
victim
we've-
triangle.
right.
where,
But
you
we've
know,
mentioned before about my mother and our relationship with her.
yeah.
But we know her childhood and the hurtful
Yes.
things that happened
it-
to
yeah.
her about, and where she ended up with zero self-esteem, and to cope, she was nasty.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
And we learn to find ways to,
And she couldn't apologize.
empathetically. Oh, she couldn't apologize. No, and that's just, she talks about losses that we don't see coming are the most difficult to deal with. And it is the most difficult when the wrongdoer doesn't seem to suffer at all. This causes us to rehash grievances. Why don't we let go of anger, and how does it serve us? And she actually talks about EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, can help. She recommends
It's
it
one
as
of
a
the only.
treatment.
It's
Yeah.
one of the only things that works for PTSD.
Yes.
Like researched successfully.
And this is very powerful to me. How do you find peace when the hurt you've suffered will never be acknowledged or repaired by the one who inflicted it? The answer is as simple as the challenge is daunting. Any way you can. And I think back to the kind of the TikTok thing where they say, "Oh, I've been feeling so down."
And then
have you been outside?
no,
Have you eaten properly?
No.
Have you exercised?
no,
Have you, all these things that make us,
feel
better, right?
And instead of down. Yeah.
No, it's just interesting. The two most powerful words in the English language are "I'm sorry" when they are spoken as part of a wholehearted apology. An apology is a gift to ourselves. Our self-respect and level of maturity rests squarely on our ability to see ourselves objectively, to take a clear-eyed look at the ways that our behavior affects others, and to acknowledge when we've acted at another person's expense.
And apologizing earns us respect in the eyes of others, and it's a gift to any relationship.
An apology needs to be full of personal responsibility and reasonable in our emotional response.
Mm-hmm. And a direct, unequivocal expression of guilt, remorse, and regret.
We are vulnerable and we have no idea how the other person is going to respond when we apologize. And she has apology number 1 is in a one-time apology between strangers. Oh, I'm sorry, I stepped on your toe or whatever. An apology 2 is that idea of letting go of the need to be right and being generous always.
Yeah.
I think if you...
So as you notice, we talked a little longer on this podcast than the last few. It's because this is a real jewel of a book.
It really is. And I really hope that, there's so much in this book. And you would think, oh, we've told you everything that's in it.
No, we haven't touched.
Even scratched the surface of what is there. So I really hope you'll dig into Why Won't You Apologize? Healing, I forget the
subtitle.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter.
It's okay.
Anyway, it's Harriet Lerner. And I read it on my Kindle, but you can definitely buy her books off of Amazon or whatever. I don't even know if they'd be in a library or not.
The interlibrary loan, possibly.
Probably.
Yeah.
And so March 30th, we're going to talk about Angela Duckworth's book on grit, the power of passion and perseverance.
Cool.
So,
and if you want to prep yourselves, you can go watch her TED Talk on grit.
Grit, yeah.
Angela Duckworth.
So thanks for joining us for Why Won't You Apologize by Harriet Lerner on Knowing Ponies episode 108.
I'm sorry.
Good night.
Good night.